Welcome and thank you for joining us for a brand new deep dive. We are about to pull back the curtain on a mind that is, well, uniquely structured, a mind that views the world not through emotion or tradition, but through the pure, unyielding lens of engineering efficiency.
Exactly. Today, our mission is to profile Thomas Peterffy, the founder of Interactive Brokers and actually one of the world's wealthiest individuals. We're not just looking at his success, though. We're really examining the philosophy, those deep-seated psychological drivers, and the absolute obsession with automation that turned him into, well, the father of modern electronic trading.
And to understand the depth of this obsession, I think we have to start with this ultimate example. It really sets the stage. Peterffy is the 23rd richest person on the planet, lives in a, $108 million home in Aspen. And an interviewer makes this dedicated transatlantic flight, right, crosses continents just to sit down with him in person.
And Peterffy, he just looks at him, genuinely puzzled, almost offended, you could say. He called that multi-thousand-dollar, multi-day in-person meeting an absurd misallocation of resources. He was like perfectly set up for a simple video call.
Right.
And this isn't just about eccentricity. It really is the core operating system of Thomas Peterffy. Yeah. If a process exists and it's inefficient, the failure to correct it is, well, in his view, it's a moral and a financial failure.
Yeah, and when you apply that level of, fanatical efficiency to the world of finance, the results are just staggering. Interactive Brokers IBKR, it's valued at over $120 billion. But what's maybe even more remarkable than the valuation are the profit margins.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They really define the success of automation. Our sources show that in 2024, IDKR generated $3.7 billion in profit on just $5.2 billion in revenue. Think about that for a second.
That's incredible.
A 71% profit margin. The psychology of money, we often look for that single driving force, the multiplier.
Yeah.
For Peterffy, it's just crystal clear. He built a completely optimized machine, and because that machine has virtually no wasted effort, no unnecessary human parts, it just generates massive, massive profit.
So let's trace this back. Where does this need for an unassailable system come from? It wasn't born in some high-tech boardroom, right? It was forged in post-war chaos. Budapest, Hungary. Peterffy was born September 30th, 1944, literally during Soviet bombing raids.
Yeah, the environment was just defined by profound, pervasive scarcity. And this imprinted a core survival mechanism in him, you have to assume. His father fled the country when Thomas was only 2, leaving him with a mother who was, well, defined by fear. He actually recounts her constant anxiety of recalling her crying and saying, "We're going to starve to death."
Wow.
And she was serious. That was a very real existential threat under communist rule.
So when the foundation of your existence is literally fear of starvation, your later pursuit of wealth isn't really about acquiring luxury, is it? It's about building this impenetrable fortress against chaos. And since the communist system offered, no blueprints for prosperity, he had to search for another operating system entirely.
And that operating system, interestingly, was found in a really unexpected place. His grandmother's library. Miraculously, it somehow survived the war, and within those 19th century French classics, Balzac, Hugo, Zola, he encountered concepts that were just completely foreign to his life: earning, building, and maybe most importantly, owning.
Owning, yeah.
He internalized the world of free market capitalism, a world where effort could actually translate into security.
The motivation was incredibly clear, really focused. He said, quote, "I always wanted to make some money because we didn't have any. That scarcity planted the seed, and it immediately translated into this entrepreneurial ingenuity, even as a child."
Oh yeah, take his first venture, age 12, chewing gum. Apparently, a classmate brought back some rare chewing gum from Austria. Now, in a command economy like communist Hungary, the price of goods is fixed, right? And supply is artificially constrained. Peterffy spotted an arbitrage opportunity, an inefficiency based purely on rarity and demand.
Right, and maybe let's just quickly define arbitrage for context. It's essentially buying something in one market and then, simultaneously selling it in another for a higher price, locking in a basically risk-free profit. In Peterffy's case, the market wasn't really geographical, it was more textural.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. He took a single rare stick of gum and just cut it into 5 smaller pieces, selling them individually in the schoolyard. He recognized that the value was in the experience of the gum, not necessarily the whole stick. So he exploited the supply shortage and maximized the total revenue from this finite resource. This wasn't just like a clever trick. It was exploiting the non-market pricing inefficiencies imposed by the state.
And this small success, predictably, immediately brought him into conflict with the system. The school principal was apparently furious, demanding to know, where is your communist conscience? I mean, even as a 12-year-old, he was already challenging the established kind of arbitrary and definitely inefficient rules of his environment.
And he quickly scaled up from there. A year later, he organized these platoons of children like a small, highly effective labor pool to hunt for scrap metal in the massive ruins of Budapest. Our sources highlight that like 70% of the city was damaged during the war. He was literally building wealth from destruction.
The bathtub anecdote is just a perfect illustration of this applied organization. They found a humongous metal bathtub. Apparently, it was so heavy it required 8 kids working all afternoon just to drag it to the way station. The effort was huge, but the payoff was described as a lot of money.
Right, and what that anecdote really shows is that from a very young age, Peterffy wasn't afraid of hard work, sure, but he immediately understood the necessity of organized, leveraged effort. He organized chaos, applied clear ingenuity, and prioritized the tangible financial reward over these arbitrary state rules. This really established that foundational psychology. Find the waste, find the opportunity.
And that drive eventually led him to escape. At 21, he secured a short-term visa to West Germany through what he later called a series of lucky mistakes, and from there, he applied to immigrate to the U.S.
Yeah, and his motivation for choosing America wasn't really abstract ideals. It was pragmatic, almost clinical. Isn't the words his estranged father wrote in his monthly letters, apparently, but the green postage stamp, what he called the extremely effective advertising, featuring the Statue of Liberty. It was just this constant, small visual representation of a system that, worked.
So he lands in New York City, December 12, 1965, with almost no English, basically no money. And the first thing that strikes him is this profound lesson in American ingenuity. The New York General Building, which was built over the very railway it operated.
Right. And this is a massive psychological breakthrough for a guy raised in a communist environment of fixed limits, right?
Yeah.
The building proved that you don't have to accept infrastructure as some kind of boundary. You could take an established system, a fixed railroad, and simply build over it, effectively superseding the existing limitations. This lesson would become his blueprint for approaching Wall Street later.
He quickly found work drawing roadmaps at a highway engineering firm, earning a pretty meager $65 a week. His job involved constant, tedious, routine calculations. These could sometimes take a draftsman, up to 20 minutes each to complete, involved multiple steps, inevitable human error.
Exactly. This tedium, this waste of 20 minutes per calculation, became the focus of his engineer's mind. And sitting there, ignored in the corner, was the solution. The $3,000 Olivetti Programma 101. It was one of the first commercial desktop computers, weighed like 20 pounds, looked like an oversized cash register, and it was covered in dust because, well, nobody wanted to deal with the perceived complexity.
And here's where that seed of automation really takes root. Peterffy volunteered for the machine, apparently quipping that he thought learning the computer language would be easier to learn than English.
Probably true for him. He took the manual home, and yeah, he was relieved to find only about 100 English words. The rest was just logic, diagrams, equations. The structured logic of the machine just clicked instantly with his structured mind.
He didn't just learn to use the Olivetti, though. He mastered its potential for leverage. He began building this comprehensive library of automated solutions for all the firm's common calculations. He took that 20-minute kind of soul-crushing slog and reduced it to a blistering 30 seconds.
That transformation of time is just. It's everything, isn't it? He had traded manual labor for leveraged, automated thinking. And what was the immediate, visible sign of his competitive advantage?
A line of draftsmen formed at his desk every single morning, waiting to use his new automated system.
Exactly. The key takeaway for Peterffy was immediate and absolute. Technology, applied correctly, is the ultimate source of efficiency and competitive advantage. He was providing indispensable leverage to his colleagues, and you get the sense he was proud to have moved beyond the physical limits of human labor.
So Peterffy's newfound programming prowess naturally drew him towards finance. He started consulting on Wall Street, writing programs that compared securities metrics like PE ratios, priced earnings, and book value. He was applying quantitative analysis to a world that was still really dominated by human intuition.
Yeah, and this led him to the highly unconventional Dr. Henry Jarecki, who was a former Yale psychiatrist of all things, who ran Mocatta and Goldsmith, a major bullion trading firm. Jarecki had this kind of observational, almost psychological model for silver's volatility. Basically, buy every downtick, sell every uptick.
Okay, simple enough on the surface. But to test and execute this model, Peterffy needed to see the data flow firsthand. So he went down to the commodity exchange, COMEX. And this is the moment where the man obsessed with logic finally confronts the chaos of human finance.
And what he found was just completely pre-modern.
Yeah.
The scene was pure pandemonium. You had reporters standing in a circular pit, dictating prices via radio headsets to clerks perched precariously on scaffolding.
Scaffolding, seriously.
Who then wrote the numbers on massive walls with chalk. It was just inefficiency, human error, and noise built right into the core system.
So this clash between his engineered world and the trading pit chaos, that's what birthed his famous quote, right? On Wall Street, I feel like I'm Alice in Wonderland. Nothing makes sense. Everything is mixed up and different than the way that I think it should be. He realized the dominant culture was just based on tradition and gut feeling, not math.
Right. And this realization is so critical to his psychology of money. If the entire foundation of the system is irrational, then the greatest profit lies not in joining the chaos, but in building a rational, systematic fortress around it. So he designed Peterffy's entire system from scratch.
He fed real-time data into his proprietary equations, including apparently a partial differential equation he developed, which allowed him to mathematically model option pricing. Let's be clear, this is heavy math.
Oh yeah, serious stuff.
But the effect was simple. It allowed him to calculate the exact fair value of a security far faster than any human could intuitively guess.
Right. His system printed fresh bid-ask quotes on that classic green bar paper, which runners then literally raced down to the pit. He was injecting pure logic into the heart of the frenzy. He wasn't relying on a hunch. He was relying on a calculation that was mathematically guaranteed, essentially, to be superior to the average human guess.
He had such profound foresight that in a 1971 interview with Barron's, when he was just 27, he made this staggering prophecy. He laid out his full vision. As soon as this electronic brain is hooked up to its voice box so he can answer the phone, staff will be able to go on a permanent vacation.
Wow. He knew exactly where the industry was going. It just took him 16 years of fighting the status quo to actually get there.
Incredible.
The partnership with Peterffy thrived, and by 1976, Peterffy was leading a team of 80 programmers.
Right.
But his ambition to automate absolutely everything was boundless, and Peterffy, well, he preferred to remain a focused precious metals dealer.
So Peterffy visited the Chicago Board Options Exchange, the CBOE, and saw a whole new level of inefficiency. Stock option spreads were routinely like $2 to $3 wide.
Huge. That meant huge guaranteed profit margins if you could simply price the options correctly. He realized this system was just ripe for exploitation by his algorithms.
And he had proof of concept, didn't he? He'd quietly been testing his own partial differential equation to price silver options and found he was making money on nearly every single trade. So when he proposed expanding into the stock options market, Peterffy refused.
And that refusal was Peterffy's big inflection point.
Yeah.
He looked at Peterffy, this successful gold giant who was fundamentally a psychiatrist with no market background, and had this profound realization. I realized if he can figure it out, so can I.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. The lesson was the complete shedding of reverence for conventional expertise. If someone without a traditional finance background could succeed based on observation, why couldn't he, the engineer of superior logic, succeed even more? The takeaway he internalized was just definitive, not to let my mind become clouded by conventional wisdom. If the rules are arbitrary or illogical, they are simply an impediment to be routed around.
So in 1977, Peterffy acted on that realization. He left with $200,000 in savings, bought a seat on the American Stock Exchange, AMX, for $36,000. And he brought his system straight onto the trading floor.
And instantly became an object of mockery. He had his computer-generated fair value sheets, these precise numerical calculations, folded into small squares. IBM in the breast pocket, DuPont in their left trouser pocket, apparently. Before making any bid, he'd consult the math. The floor traders, relying on shouts and intuition, they just called him mad.
That distinction is key, isn't it? The trader's culture was based on perceived insider knowledge, relationships, maybe feel. Peterffy's culture was based on the absolute certainty of his math. He was literally performing this systematic external audit on every single bid, and they just couldn't understand that discipline.
But even with his math, he wasn't immune to the market's inherent dangers. He lost half of his initial capital pretty early on a bad trade he suspected was actually insider dealing. For a man whose whole psychological fortress was built on control and certainty, losing 50%, that must have been devastating.
You'd think so. But instead of quitting, the loss only amplified his core need for control. It instilled this absolutely fanatical discipline. He committed to hedging every position perfectly, religiously following the dictates of his fair value sheets. This defensively perfect system, rebuilt and named Timber Hill by 1982, was designed to be, well, unassailable.
And now we get to the legendary technological hacks. Confined to his office because of a knee injury, he was tethered to his Quotron machine. Now, this machine displayed stock prices, but only one at a time, which made it impossible to analyze the entire market dynamically. When he tried to buy the full data feed, Quotron just refused.
The ultimate roadblock for the man who needed absolute data efficiency. So what was the solution? Peterffy essentially committed digital espionage. He decided he would help himself.
He physically cut the dedicated phone line wire that carried the data feed and attached an oscilloscope to it. Now, an oscilloscope, for our listeners, is basically a device that visually displays electrical voltage signals over time. Peterffy and his team studied the electrical pulses carrying each stock price, reverse engineering the entire data structure.
He figured out that every single number, every stock price digit, had a unique signature of spikes and dips in the electrical current. You can think of it like a highly sophisticated form of Morse code, but electrical.
Exactly. And soon, his computer was being fed real-time prices across the entire market, bypassing the official vendors completely. This speed and breadth of data, back in the early 1980s, gave his algorithms an immense, almost unfair competitive advantage over basically every other trader on Wall Street.
But even with superior data, he still needed humans, right, to execute the trades on the floor. And specialists, those insiders who controlled order flow, were kind of clubby and continued to shun him and his math-based bids. So Peterffy realized he needed to hack the social system itself.
Right, so he applied this cold, strategic calculation to human behavior. He hired 6 tall, beautiful women to trade for him. It was a conscious hack of the human element on the floor.
And the result was immediate, predictable.
Immediate and predictable.
Yeah.
Everybody loved the women, he said. And the floor specialists who had ignored Peterffy were suddenly fighting tooth and nail to fill his new employees' trades.
So Peterffy's genius is this duality. He automates the abstract concepts of trading, but he knows exactly how to apply social engineering to manipulate the messy human systems when he has to. The result, in his words, we were making money hand over fist.
Yeah, this unique kind of chaotic environment even inspired Hollywood, apparently. Peterffy made a $10,000 bet with film producer Aaron Russo that he could train any layperson to become a successful trader, and he succeeded. He trained filmmaker Melvin Van Peebles for a year and collected the bet.
No.
Yeah, and a year later, Russo produced the movie Trading Places, which centers on a very similar bet between 2 rich financiers involving a street hustler and a broker. It just shows how bizarre that floor trading culture really was at the time.
Wow. But the specialists, they eventually realized they were being gamed, right? They issued an ultimatum. Timber Hill had to become a market maker.
Right, and that's a pivotal term. It meant Peterffy was now obligated to provide constant bid-ask prices for all the options he dealt in, requiring split-second responses, instantly updating prices based on the shifting market.
So this obligation put immense pressure on his old system, which still relied on receiving price instructions by phone. His math was perfect, but the transmission time was just too slow. So a human-imposed bureaucratic rule, the market maker requirement, once again necessitated a technological invention.
And the need for that split-second response led to Peterffy's next breakthrough invention in 1983. This is 27 years before the iPad was even conceived, the first handheld trading computer.
These weren't sleek devices, though, were they? Our sources describe them as, like, rectangular boxes the size of encyclopedias, filled with transistors and circuit boards, powered by a crude touchscreen. But they gave his traders instant access to quotes derived from his superior algorithms right there in the pit.
Exactly. But the logistics of feeding these early computers were apparently a nightmare. They could only handle about 5 trades before needing complete updates. So, to feed the relentless machine, clerks had to literally sprint the 2 blocks between the exchange floor and the office, carrying satchels of these devices back and forth for fresh data and exposure calculations. It was this crazy fusion of high technology and intense physical labor.
And the exchanges continued to fight this invasion of logic, right?
Yeah.
The CBOE completely banned his analytical devices. The NYSE, more reluctantly, offered a compromise. Okay, he could install monitors, but only on the back wall, like 30 feet from the action, way too far away for a trader to reliably read in the chaos of the pit.
Yeah, a classic example of bureaucratic inefficiency weaponizing distance. But Peterffy responded by, well, weaponizing color. When denied easy visual access, he engineered a visual solution.
He rewrote the code to create what he called a psychedelic light show. So instead of printing readable numbers, each digit of the price flashed as a different, distinctive color. His traders, who were obviously highly disciplined, learned to read the prices based purely on the color sequence from 30 feet away.
Incredible. He had turned a bureaucratic physical impediment into a specialized competitive edge that only his team could actually utilize.
This relentless push finally culminated in 1987, 16 years after his original prophecy. He achieved his dream, the first fully automated trading system in Wall Street history. And he did it by leveraging the newly emerging screen-based network, NASDAQ.
But again, he didn't just use NASDAQ, he kind of hijacked it. He wired his Timber Hill computer directly into the NASDAQ terminal's dedicated data line to pull prices, run his complex algorithms, and then send the trades back through the same cable, completely bypassing all human intervention.
That worked perfectly until a NASDAQ employee discovered the Timber Hill office. They found no human traders, just machines doing all the work. And the employee insisted on the ultimate absurdity. All trades must be entered manually via a keyboard, just like everyone else.
That really is the ultimate Alice in Wonderland moment, isn't it? Technology must pretend to be human to be considered legal. And Peterffy's response is probably the single most famous anecdote of his entire career, the absolute masterpiece of malicious compliance, the mechanical spider.
Okay, tell us about the spider.
Right. Unable to argue with the rule requiring manual entry, he and his team built this physical contraction. They set up a frame of metal arms and tiny motors suspended over the keyboard. A camera read the screen, and when the computer identified a profitable trade opportunity, the metal fingers typed out the orders with what sources describe as a violent percussion.
You have to imagine the scene. A computer watching another computer, controlling mechanical arms, typing furiously. The machine typed faster and more accurately than any human could ever hope to. The NASDAQ man apparently watched this spectacle in stunned silence and just left. He couldn't find a rule against physical typing by a machine.
And that system survived. Timber Hill made $25 million that year and $50 million the next. His system had been tested by chaos, scarcity, arbitrary rules, physical limitations, and each time efficiency backed by unwavering engineering logic just won.
So by the early 1990s, Peterffy was clearly a giant. Goldman Sachs, recognizing the superiority of his operation, offered him $900 million for Timber Hill. And Peterffy countered with an impossible $3 billion, signaling pretty clearly he wasn't selling.
Right. And why turn down almost $1 billion? This is where his psychology of money just triumphs over conventional wisdom, I think. He wasn't financially mad. He was looking beyond the immediate cash payout. He was already preparing for his next great strategic pivot. That $3 billion counteroffer was really a negotiating tactic designed to signal he wasn't playing the conventional selling game. He was already focused on the next great inefficiency.
Which was?
Retail brokerage. In 1993, he launched Interactive Brokers, IBKR, designed specifically to give ordinary investors the same low-cost, high-tech advantages he'd created for himself. Although for years, as the market remained largely analog, he admitted that IBKR was kind of an elegant solution to a problem that didn't yet exist.
But when the great automation of Wall Street finally accelerated in the early 2000s, the floor traders who had mocked him, the specialists, they suddenly found themselves staring at obsolescence. They needed a reliable, stable, computer-based platform to continue professional trading.
And crucially, the people who chose him were his former rivals. Why? He stated that they chose him because, quote, they knew that I was an honest business person. Despite all their fighting, they trusted the reliability and the sheer logic of his systems. And that's how Interactive Brokers became the preferred broker for professional traders, built on this foundation of reliability and, of course, efficiency.
Interesting. Then by the mid-2000s, the technological battle shifted again, right? Into high-frequency trading, HFT, where competitors like Citadel were spending billions to shave microseconds off execution times. Peterffy refused to join that contest.
Yeah, and this is fascinating psychologically, I think. He walked away from the speed war because, as he put it was not interesting to me anymore. He recognized the diminishing returns of chasing that microsecond advantage. His new, more compelling challenge became how to build the best platform for people to trade. He shifted from being the fastest player to being the most comprehensive and efficient service provider.
And his approach to the company's IPO in 2007 was just classic Peterffy optimization. Instead of using the traditional Wall Street roadshow model, which involves, massive banking fees, he used a Dutch auction.
Right. For those unfamiliar, a Dutch auction starts with a high asking price and then systematically lowers the price until enough bids are received to sell all the shares. It's a really efficient pricing discovery mechanism. By using this method, Peterffy just sidestepped the established banking system and saved, reportedly, $80 million in fees.
$80 million?
$80 million. And he didn't even need the capital.
Yeah.
He owned nearly 100% of the company at the time. He apparently did it purely for advertising, just to put the company's name out there in the public domain. But he maximized the efficiency of the capital raising process itself. That $80 million saving is just a direct testament to his conviction that arbitrary rules must be routed around.
So today, the machine he built is this marvel of efficiency, often compared to the Costco model for its low-cost, high-volume operation. He shut down Timber Hill entirely in 2017. IBKR manages over $700 billion in client assets for 4 million customers, but operates with only about 3,000 employees, most of whom are engineers.
That right there is the $120 billion ethos in action. Automate everything, minimize human intervention, and charge fees so incredibly low that competitors relying on traditional structures just cannot possibly compete. His success is built purely on observation, applied logic, and the rejection of unnecessary steps.
When asked the secret to his success, his reply just summarizes everything we've discussed, really linking his childhood scarcity to his current wealth. It's all common sense. Hard work and common sense is my story. He's apparently never read a business book. His curriculum was built on necessity and logic.
Yeah, and he stepped down as CEO in 2019 but remains chairman. And at 81, he's apparently sort of running the sales and marketing department because nobody wants to do it, acknowledging that he's learning the marketing trade as he goes.
Yeah.
Which kind of reflects his belief that any necessary process can be optimized, even the messy human world of sales.
And the final, just astonishing detail from his interview. As the 3-hour discussion wound down, the 81-year-old Peterffy checked his screen one last time. He just noted, "We're up $1.44, not bad." While he was talking about his life and his philosophy, Thomas Peterffy, the boy who feared starvation, had made another $1.7 billion. His automated machine just never rests.
Peterffy's life is such a fascinating case study. His enormous wealth came not from some innate trading intuition, but from an almost fanatical commitment to structural efficiency and automation, driven by that early fundamental need for control and security. He just refused to accept conventional wisdom if it failed the test of basic common sense.
Yeah, if you look at the psychological arc, his foundational fear of scarcity really fueled this unwavering pursuit of systems that were absolutely unassailable by external chaos. He conquered the chaos of communist Hungary, the chaos of the New York General Building's arbitrary limits, and finally the chaos of Wall Street itself.
So we want to challenge you, our listener, to maybe apply the Peterffy lens to your own world. What are the absurd misallocations of resources in your professional life? What processes in your industry are followed simply because of tradition, making them feel kind of like Alice in Wonderland because they just lack true common sense?
Right. Think about the mechanical spider. Think about the $80 million in fees saved by choosing the Dutch auction IPO. Peterffy's greatest innovation, maybe, was questioning the critical systems that everyone else was just following mindlessly. What critical system are you following right now simply because you haven't thought to automate it or even just question the process?
Yeah, the lesson here, I think, is that innovation often comes not from building something entirely new, but from aggressively optimizing something that already exists, and critically, refusing to accept arbitrary limits. Find the inefficiency, and you find the profit, or at least a better way.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What's the most inefficient Alice in Wonderland process you've encountered recently that you think Thomas Peterffy would have immediately tried to build a mechanical spider to fix? Share your thoughts with us, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.